morning, everybody. Good morning. So this morning we said we would have a little tribute to Joanna Macy and Louise Alley. Did anybody bring anything they wanted to read or have anything they want to talk about? We'll get into it, but I just wanted to know if there were things I needed to pay attention to.
Peter, I thought your message was right on, right on. So I didn't feel I needed to add anything to it.
Okay, right. Um, thank you. Yeah, that's what
Uh,
Margaret said also.
Peter, I thought, but
Susan, you're breaking up. I can't do it.
wonderful interview. Um, I listened to a wonderful, yeah, I see my internet connection is unstable. Sorry. Uh, I have a poem that Joanna Macy translated by Rilke, and it was one of her favorites. So I might read that. I think I have it here.
Yeah, that would be great. That's one of the her other claims to fame, besides being a eco-dharma teacher and Buddhist teacher, was that she was a Rilke translator.
I was reminded in everyone's descriptions of Louise of skillful means and the story of being a white bird in the snow. She really, really apparently embodied the Bodhisattva. I wish I had known her.
Yeah, she absolutely did. I knew Louise for a few years before she got involved with Treetop because um, I was working at crisis and counseling centers in Augusta, and she was a crisis worker. And that was work that she did for a number of years before she retired. And as you can imagine, that's not easy work and can be very challenging. And she was completely up for that. I think she loved doing it, frankly. Excuse me. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about Louise, and then we'll segue over to Joanna. Yeah, she had an almost invisible presence. It was kind of interesting because she was very quiet and was always unobtrusive. You could be sitting in a retreat, and all of a sudden I'd look over and she was there. She hadn't been there the last time I looked over, and there she was, because she came in so quietly and she just kind of sat down and so on. But she gave of herself unstintingly and unselfishly. And perhaps the most significant time of that was when my teacher Margaret was dying, and Louise was her primary caregiver. Louise was by her side every day. And ultimately, Margaret had a very peaceful death, which was she had esophageal cancer, which is a pretty nasty thing, and yet some combination of who she was and who Louise was, her death was very peaceful, as were the weeks leading up to it. And again, Louise was just unfailingly there, giving of herself. But that's who she was. If there was a retreat, Louise would show up with meals, you know. And again, in her own way, that she would just kind of quietly come in and put it in the fridge or whatever, and it would be there for the Sangha. And she was a consummate gardener. she had gardens at her. She lived close by. She lived in Waterville, not only a couple of miles from Treetop. And she had gardens there that she loved, but she also used to come and tend the gardens at Treetop. There was some beautiful gardens there, and again, it was almost like unsolicited. Louise would just show up and do these things, quietly. She'd come, she'd go, not leaving a ripple in the pond, as it were. So an enormously generous spirit. And someone who was deeply caring, deeply connected to the earth. And therefore she's to some extent the kind of person who can easily go unnoticed. I mean, it's kind of like she's making great contributions with no extra ripples, and it's like nothing drawing attention to herself, nothing about her ego. So she was extraordinary person. Um, Maybe I'll segue to talking. Well, does anybody want to add anything about Louise before I go on to talk about Joanna? Okay, so as I said in that little piece that I wrote, yeah, so they were very different women in the sense that Joanna Macy was on the global stage. I'll talk a little bit. I'm working this summer with a student who's a professor of environmental engineering at UMass Amherst, and he comes to Maine for the summer, and somehow got in touch with me, and so we've been. I'm doing koan study with him, and delighting in torturing him with the koans. But anyway, so one of the first meetings I had with him, he said, "Well, who are the main proponents of eco-dharma?" And the name that came to me immediately was Joanna Macy. And then I thought of David Loy. Some of you may know David. He's a teacher out in Colorado. And then my list stopped. I mean, there may be others, but they're not others that I'm familiar with. And Joanna was so head and shoulders above everybody else. And this is where I came to know her first. This was, I think, probably her, as far as work of literature. World as Lover, World as Self is a book that she wrote, and Thich Nhat Hanh wrote the foreword to this book. Robert Aiken wrote something about the book, and so on. So, when did she publish this? 1991. So it goes back a ways. But that title suggests the central thesis of the book, World as Lover, World as Self. And those being two different levels of intimacy, of relationship to the world. And we're able to experience world as lover, then just as with a lover, we naturally want to take care of it. We want to help. We respect and we respond when it's being hurt or destroyed. World of self is even a deeper expression of connection. It is the expression of non-separation, that there's no the separation of one body. And when that world thrives, I thrive. And when that world is being destroyed, I'm being destroyed. Absolutely no distinction. And one of the things that Joanna, it's interesting, because again, I'm having this conversation with this gentleman that's an environmental engineer, and we were talking just a couple of days ago about how so many years the environmental movement tried to use guilt and fear as primary motivators. And anybody who's taken psychology 101 knows that guilt and fear are not good motivators. You know, they either cause people to be paralysis, or people to turn away, or people to even respond antagonistically. And so this is, to one extent, what's happened for many years. That the very people who've sought to protect the earth have given out messages that were counterproductive. Joanna, I think one of the most significant aspects of her teaching was, as a Buddhist practitioner, she was trying to hold both sides of the dialectic, and both acknowledging the beauty of the world, the love for the world, and the destruction and the horror and the pain. Now, that's a very difficult dialectic to hold. Right. And it, a temptation is in the face of suffering to turn away, in the face of pain and destruction to turn away. But if we have a truly loving relationship, or truly, one body relationship, then we cannot turn away. Any more than Louise could turn away when she saw Margaret suffer. So we need to have our eyes open and engage with the whole thing. What John Kabat-Zinn called the full catastrophe. But it's more than that, because there's the whole positive aspect too. There is wonder in the world. There is beauty in the world. There are so many marvelous experiences, encounters that we can have. And we can't deny those any more than we can deny that those are in jeopardy and being destroyed in so many places. Eyes wide open to the whole panoply of the experience of the natural world. Another thing that Joanna taught was, she had a thing that she called, to develop, she had some others she developed it with, but I think she was one of the principal. It was called the Council of Beings. Anybody ever have that opportunity to do a Council of Beings? Well, would usually be done in a particular ecological context, like maybe we're having, well, a discussion about a particular forest, a particular watershed, and it's actually a decision-making tool, because what we would do is we'd have, let's say, I don't know, 10, 20 people, and each person would take the voice of a being in that ecosystem and speak for it in the discussion, in the dialogue. So there might be someone speaking for the fish, somebody speaking for the bees, and so on and so forth, and for what they need. And in that way, aggregating a kind of understanding of the complexity of the ecosystem, the multiplicity of requirements, demands, necessities, and maybe sometimes the conflicts that arise there. And again, a way of sort of deepening our understanding of and our relationship to a natural environment. So she developed some very skillful means of coming to terms with and seeking resolution to many of the problems that are happening currently. And she did that again all over the world pretty unfailingly for many years. Well, I read that, see that book, she wrote that book in 91. So she had a long history of this engagement. Any thoughts, reactions?
Supporting what you had talked about, Peter, in this interview that I listened to.
Unknown caller.
Oh, I see I'm unstable again. I don't know if you can hear me.
Well, and my phone just started to ring.
Oh, I'll continue. Joanna was talking about how we should not despair about taking care of the earth. And she likened the earth to our own mother. And if our mother was feeling sick or in bad shape or dying, we would tend to her. And so, therefore, we tend to the earth, even though it may also be sick and dying. All the more need to tend. So, no despair.
Yes, despair is so counterproductive because it's exactly what you're saying. It's kind of the end of involvement and the end of the possibility of healing and change. Again, that idea, that if we create too much fear, we create paralysis, we create, rejection. I mean, I think part of the reason there's so much antipathy towards the I don't know if we can even call it an environmental movement anymore, but the efforts on behalf of the earth is that kind of pushing it, the message is so terrifying that I'm going to push the whole thing away. It's not happening. And, that's where we see so much denial in ways that are completely insane. We all, I should say this, but we all know that climate change, for example, climate change is happening. It's present. It's in our lives right now. Again, I was talking with this environmental engineering professor about the climate here in New England. And one of the things that he said was incontrovertible is that the overnight temperatures are rising dramatically. That's one of the clearest indicators of how much change we're experiencing. And I think of that in my own experience. I think I may have mentioned this before, but back when I first started studying with Steph and Margaret, They were living in Orono, and there were several of us that had a carpool. We drive up there twice a week, Wednesday nights and Saturday, I think. I don't know. Anyway, one of the weekend days, and coming back on Wednesday nights, my car in those days had a thermometer, outside thermometer, so it would tell me what the temperature was. And so I don't know, we'd be coming back 9, 10 at night. I was living in Hollowell at the time, so driving down 95. And for some reason, the consistently coldest place on that drive was Sydney. Don't know why. Are you a fan of Sydney, Deborah?
That's where we lived, and that was where we experienced -30.
Okay. So yeah, that was always the coldest place, and and it wasn't uncommon. I mean, it wasn't that late at night yet, and I would see 17 below, 15 below, 20 below. Several years ago, I talked with some greenhouse owners in that area. They have a large nursery and greenhouses and all that, so they're acutely aware of the temperatures. They track them. It doesn't get that cold anymore. It rarely goes below 0 there. And certainly doesn't get down to double digits below. Distinct, and that's only in a span of, I guess it's longer than 20 years, I guess, since I started going up to Orono. Anyway. So these changes are happening. They're clear. And yet we, psychological tendency to push them away. Hmm. But anyway, so the holding the dialectic is so important. And Susan used that metaphor of caring for your mother. Well, we care for our mother, I mean, typically out of love, right? That's the force, the bond, the affinity, the things, it might be out of guilt or shame or something else, but hopefully more often than not would be out of love, out of respect, out of caring, out of giving back. And so that same relationship is so important when we're talking about the natural world. If we don't have love, if we don't have respect, if we don't see our lives diminished as the world is diminished, then we don't have a basis for acting. We don't have a basis for taking care.
I want to say something that's a little strange, I'll just say. When we talk about the earth dying, the earth is not dying. The ecosystem is not dying. What's happening is that it is altering, it is adjusting, and it is becoming problematic and foreign to the human and so many other beings' experience here. But, we've had many other times where massive die-offs have occurred and new emerging has happened on this planet. The Earth is not dying, the Earth is expressing herself.
The things we are used
She is extruding the noxious foreign acting bodies and will be re-expressing. It just may not be a place where human beings will be chronicling it. And unfortunately, along with us, there will be so many other beings that we feel relationship with who will also not be here. But it's a kind of, anyway.
I think that's what's called a Pyrrhic victory.
Well, it's Pyrrhic for us. And that's a source of huge mourning and suffering for us. But it feels human-centric to call that dying. Egocentric, as it were, on a larger scale.
Anthropocentric.
Anthropocentric is a good word.
Yes. Well, yes. And that all that you say is true. I mean, I think that's I don't I don't say the earth is dying because I understand it as yours. I don't think I've said that because I understand I agree with what you say. Things will the earth is just going to eliminate the virus. If we, can use that metaphor, and we are the virus. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other things that are getting killed at the same time, and awful suffering that's going on at the same time. And so I think we have to constantly come back to that. We have to constantly come back to the suffering of all beings. And we need to understand, and I know that Joanna did this, that suffering is not exclusively a human attribute or experience, that we are causing suffering in the natural world, that millions, billions of other beings are suffering along with us. And many of them are quite a lot for, we can turn on the air conditioner. And so we can have temporary remission from the heat. But there's lots of beings on this planet who cannot. So we can remediate for a while. But nature is, suffering right now. I mean, interesting. Again, this guy was talking a lot about hydrology and the water cycles and stuff. So he's not too impressed that we're in a drought right now, but I am. God, and I went yesterday and I left early in the morning and I didn't water before I came back, and I came back and my garden had wilted. Things are really dry out there right now. It's just been an odd thing that there have been some showers lately, and they went north of us and they went south of us, and they didn't hit Unity at all. So we've been several weeks without any rain, and it is dry out there. It is, my estimation, pretty awful. And with that goes the fire danger. I'm just reading today, right? We've got a warning here in Maine because of the air quality, because of the fires up in Canada. The smoke is back again today. So that's again a reminder of the complexity of the interrelationship. When we talk about everything being interrelated, here we are. The fires are burning. I don't know where they are not currently, and whether they're in Quebec or Manitoba or what province, but hundreds and hundreds of miles from here, and yet they're warning people in Maine who are impacted by such things not to go outside or not to be doing anything strenuous.
Could Susan read the Rilke poem?
I would be happy to. This is a good time. This is one that she had mentioned in her interview. And when I picked it up just now and skimmed through, I thought it reminds me a lot of a koan. And the koan is one of your favorite, Peter. Dijon works the fields.
Hoeing
So,
the garden?
oh, in the
fields?
garden.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
So see what you think. I have many brothers in the South who move handsome in their vestments through cloister gardens. The Madonnas they make are so human, and I dream often of their Titans where God becomes an ardent flame. But when I lean over the chasm of myself, it seems my God is dark and like a web, 100 roots silently drinking. This is the ferment I grow out of. More I don't know, because my branches rest in deep silence, stirred only by the wind.
Thank you for that. Maybe this is a good point. I'll read just a little bit from Joanna's book here. From the first chapter. Our planet is in trouble. It's hard to go anywhere without being confronted by the wounding of our world, the tearing of the very fabric of life. I returned this day from Germany, where I lived in the 1950s amidst the clear waters, rich green fields, and woodlands of Bavaria. Now there is an environmental plague called the Waldsterben, the dying of the trees, and the Black Forest is reckoned to be about 50% dead from industrial and automobile pollution. South of the Black Forest rise the headwaters of the Rhine, which flows down through Basel, across Europe, and into the North Sea. A 1986 fire at the Sandoz chemical plant in Basel washed 30,000 tons of mercury and dioxin-forming chemicals into the once great life-bearing artery of Europe. Millions of fish floated belly up, and the deaths of the seals as far away as the North Sea have been traced to the accident. Along this majestic river, requiems were held. On its many bridges, people gathered, banging on pots and pans and anything that could make a noise, and cried, Der Rhein ist tot. The Rhine is dead. I went to Germany to lead a workshop just south of the Black Forest, near the source of the Rhine. We came together to explore the inner resources that are needed to take action in today's world. The corner of Europe where we met, given the prevailing winds in April and May of '86, received some of the heaviest radioactive fallout from the disaster at the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl. During the workshop, one participant brought out a loaf of bread and said reverently, "This was made from grains harvested before Chernobyl. We can eat it without fear." In the face of what's happening, how do we avoid feeling overwhelmed and just giving up, turning away to the many diversions and demands of our consumer societies? It is essential that we develop our inner resources. We have to learn to look at things as they are, painful and overwhelming as that may be, for no healing can begin until we are fully present to our world, until we learn to sustain the gaze. I think that says it right there, and I think that's goes to the tenets of the Zen peacemakers. Not knowing, setting down all our preconceptions and ideas and the things that we hold so dear. Bearing witness. The second piece of that is bearing witness, and that's what Joanna, I think, is pointing to right here. To the things we like and to the things that we don't like, to the things that attract us and the things that we find difficult and distasteful. We have to be willing to look at the whole thing. And that opens the gates to our responding with loving kindness and compassion. Those don't rise out of our bypassing or ignoring the reality. They arise out of our engagement with the reality. And now we've lost Joanna. We've lost such an important voice. And it's so important that we perpetuate the message that she brought, the message that she was teaching. Because so many people, this was 1991, but she saw it clearly. So many people are turning away from these realities and turning into things like consumerism and attempting to make the angst go away by buying more and more stuff, by building bigger and bigger houses, etc. Which is, of course, exactly the wrong thing to be doing in response to this crisis. But it's trying to put temporary salve, a temporary bandage on the wound that's getting worse and worse.
Peter, when you mentioned how looking at the whole picture, looking at the difficult parts, opens our hearts, opens up the pathway to compassion, loving kindness. Um, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who's a practicing Buddhist and a psychologist lost his wife, and she had an aneurysm, and so she went from being perfectly healthy to being gone in about 2 days. So it was quite a shock. And over time, he reported to me that in the course of his grieving, he said, I found so many moments that opened up in a way I have never seen before, that opened up to such beauty, to such clarity. And then it would fade. And he said it lasted for a few months during the grieving process. And then he kind of got through that and moved on with life. But it's caused me to think a lot about grief these days. And isn't that kind of what we're doing when we do look at the whole picture? We are seeing the beauty there, but we're also grieving for what is lost. And I I think that grief can open us up. So thank you.
Yeah, I think in my view, grief is extreme. We don't like it, but we should. It's extremely important. It's healing. We can't heal without grieving. And yeah, and again, in this culture, we try to just move past things. It's like, you lose a loved one, go see your physician, get some tranquilizers, take those for a couple of weeks and be done with it. Right? If someone is grieving and tearful, we pathologize that in many cases. And again, we medicate it, as opposed to, in other cultures, people scream and wail and cry and rip at their flesh, whatever. That is grief. That's an important and normal human emotion that we try to deny that. We try to, and so, again, my view, grieving is extremely important, and it is the pathway to healing, you know. And by the way, I think it's kind of, if we don't grieve, we pay in other ways. Like I think we end, for example, depression. I think in many cases is a consequence of failure to grieve. We've got to go through that fire. If we don't go through that fire, then there's just a slow burn that goes on and on. We're not able to heal. We're stuck. I go back to sort of the Zen peacemaker retreats. Some of those I would love to do, but they're expensive. They're thousands of dollars, unfortunately. But the one that's most striking to me is the one that they have at Auschwitz, and but by going to be willing to go into that camp, I'm willing to face the horror, the absolute horror of what occurred there. It's also the gateway to healing. It's also the gateway to reconciliation. It's also the gateway to people coming together and moving past the deep wounds that were created. Okay, I'm going to say, there's a reason. I'm going to say this with a little bit of caution. I'm not sure I want to open this can of worms, but there's a reason what's happening in Gaza is happening. Because people in Israel have not successfully grieved and healed the wounds of the Holocaust and of many things subsequent to that. So are out of their state of denial and trying to sort of I don't know what the right word is, to submerge and not deal with that horrible reality and not grieve it thoroughly, comes this reaction, this awful, awful, awful reaction of what's happening in Gaza right now. If we don't heal the wounds of the past, they will come back and haunt us. If we don't thoroughly grieve the destruction of the past, then we will have destruction in the future.
I think one could say that the same might be true in our country related to slavery, and that is the wound that hurt us and has not been properly grieved and is now coming back.
Yes, and the genocide of indigenous Americans.
Yes, and that too. Yes.
Right? There were
Our
10
history.
million people on this continent when the first Europeans arrived. And I think there was, at the end of the colonization, there was maybe 1 million, or two. So another 8 million person Holocaust. So yeah, absolutely. And they will haunt us. And we're trying to do the exact opposite, right? We're changing the history books. We're going to make it go away. Make it go away. America's history is glorious. It's all wonderful. We never mistreated the slaves. We never killed the indigenous people. And so we will pay for that again and again and again. Because that which we don't grieve and heal will fester.
But the other aspect of it is that, in fact, other than grieving, in fact, we have not changed as human beings. Greed, anger, and ignorance. So you could grieve all you want for what happened before, but if you got the same greed, anger, and ignorance now, you're going to do the same thing again. And this is what we are doing to each other and to our planet. And so that's where I like to look at the meta picture. That we can aspire to a process of self-transformation and transformation of the human character. But the meta picture is that there's more than that evolving in this universe. So everything you look back at repeats the same story of greed, anger, and ignorance.
So are you saying we should despair?
No, and this is why I'm talking about, yes, of course we can despair. Yes, yes, that is part of it. Yes. But this is why I'm talking about that the planet is not dying. We have to keep in mind that there's more to this, that we are, in fact, able to perceive and experience than just our own shortcomings. And we ourselves also, even as individuals, as the whole, can experience evolution. That's what we can do. That's a transcends despair. We know that emerging from us is also love and compassion and wisdom and growth and metamorphosis. We know this. We know all of this. This is the same you're talking about. We can see metamorphosis and we can see withering. They're both true. But we can experience all of it. We do. One can even argue that experiencing the withering, as you're talking about in terms of grief, can impel us towards metamorphosis, which again could be seen as something that the planet is in fact doing.
Well, I certainly agree that with what you're saying to the extent, the planet is going to adapt as it needs to, which you're saying is metamorphosis, and by our actions we can drive that in a very dark and painful way, or we can achieve some level of successful adaptation, of harmonious living rather than simply destruction.
And looking at it helps us with our compassion, which is again one of the best things we can do for all.
Compassion for all, not easy, not easy. So this is probably a good point to segue to the Tara mantra for Joanna and for Louise. And anybody else want to include anybody else? So there's probably some people may know today is also the memorial service for Natalie Harris, Peter Harris's wife. So let's include Natalie as well, and Peter, who's I'm sure suffering greatly.
I'm going to mention that it's also Tisha B'Av, which is in Jewish tradition has been mourned for millennia as or whatever as the destruction of the temple. So that's the Jewish story of mourning, which again, as you've pointed out, may not necessarily have succeeded in stopping the chain. But there certainly has been mourning for fast day for the nation for millennia with
Thank you. Anything else we want to add? Okay. Om Tare Tutare Turi Svaha. 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 Okay. Thank you, everyone. Should we say our vows, Deirdre?
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.